Hello gamers, and welcome to another exciting edition of Game Warp. I'm Elwood.
I'm Kim.
And this is our review of Remember Me. Remember Me is the debut title from Dontnod Entertainment, who are now probably better known for giving us the likes of Life is Strange and Vampire. Here they teamed up with Capcom to produce a vision of a Neo Paris in which you play Neilin, a memory hunter who is also suffering from amnesia and finds herself working with the underground resistance called the Eros. Now, the game itself is rather unique, especially for Dontnod Entertainment, as here it is a straightforward action game, and at the same time drawing a very similar sort of artistic freedom that we've seen for the likes of BioShock. However, at the same time, being a game that's very much on rails while at the same time giving this illusion of complete freedom within its world. But I mean, opening thoughts on this one, Kim. I mean, obviously we're big fans of Dontnod Entertainment. They're sort of one of our studios, along with the likes of Spooky Doorway. As you know, this is a studio we're always excited to see what they're coming out with next. And for one reason or another, I mean, we never actually played Remember Me, and it was sort of like a case of, well, we're waiting for Life is Strange 2 to come out. Why don't we go back and play their very first title? Because it's one of those games that sort of came out and nobody sort of discussed it since. It sort of occasionally turns up in your trade-in stores, but it's not one of those games that anyone really discussed. And it's all the more surprising, especially seeing how popular Life is Strange is. You would expect more people to be sort of going back and revisiting it, like we've obviously done for this review.
Well, I mean, Remember Me is an interesting title, to say the least. I mean, the set of it in being in the Neo Paris, it's really pretty to look at. There's a lot of you start playing this and you start seeing how far, I guess, Dontnod had changed from this original kind of action adventure sort of style to, Life is Strange. But in certain parts, you still kind of see that love of the choice-based idea and the quick time events, making your choices quickly and getting things done. And I don't know if maybe they changed the direction because, maybe at that time Telltale Games was already having a good footing. Maybe that's why they decided, well, QTE maybe is something that they don't want to do, but rather more a story-driven sort of Life is Strange, making your choices idea. I don't know what their mentality behind of why they changed the direction, because Remember Me is not a bad game, per se is not a bad game. A lot of things visually works really well. There are a little kinks with the gameplay. There's a little, like you said, somewhat of an illusion of an open world. But there really isn't much place for you to explore. You just kind of keep going. You just keep going forward to your next goal, to your next quest. And finding whatever platforming ledge that you can go on to kind of go a little, I think it reminded me of a little of kind of Uncharted, Lara, Tomb Raider sort of style. Early Tomb Raider, not now Tomb Raider, I guess.
Oh, it's definitely very similar to when we look at the original Uncharted. As you said, and it suffers very much from the same platforming issues that we had with that game, where you're looking for ledges and the sort of route that it wants you to take, because it is very much on rails, and even though it wants you to think that you have this huge open world to interact with, you really don't. And it's kind of a shame, really, because to look at this game, it looks absolutely stunning, and you wouldn't think that this is just a small little production studio, which they obviously were at the time. This being obviously their debut game, they're bringing it out with Capcom, and especially when the setting, I mean, this is Neo Paris. It's not Neo LA or New York, or an American setting that we're used to seeing. I mean, this is obviously a European city that we're getting the future vision of, and certainly even when you look at books and movies and stuff, I mean, we very rarely get that futuristic vision of Europe. There's obviously a couple of exceptions there with things like District 13, but even still, it's not as it doesn't look as pretty as this one certainly does. I really, again, this game also has a really fantastic concept in which the world has now been given the ability to upload and share their memories on the net. So everyone has this brain implant called Senzen, and basically it gives you the ability that you can not only can put your memories up on the net, you can also remove unhappy or unpleasant memories as well. So you can edit out those unhappy breakups and all the things that would kind of suck. And it's kind of funny that
it's very eternal sunshine.
I know it's just all the more funny that we're playing this at the same time that we just recently played We Happy Few, which again was all about removing bad memories and keeping everything very sort of happy joy. But unlike that game, we've got very much a clear division where you've got like the rich who obviously can live these perfect sanitized memory clean lives, and then at the same time you've got the very poor who are just like memory ravaged sort of like ghouls who are living in the sewer and just like gone completely feral because of how they've been basically used.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is kind of like there is like a the evil corporation sort of thing, which is kind of where we start. It's like in Memorize, and somehow our character Nilin has gotten her memory erased, and in this mysterious character, because everybody gets mysterious characters to lead their way when you need help, called Edge, comes into the picture, and we hear him pretty much in our ear all the time, just kind of like in our minds telling us what to do, where we need to go next, and what's going on. He's kind of like our bird's eye. He knows everything. He kind of directs us in the right direction and tells us when danger's near, and what things are what we have to do, and all those things that we wouldn't know in the current situation that we're in.
Yeah.
So, to say the least, I think the story itself is really, really creative, and we would expect nothing less from Dontnod. I mean, Life is Strange created a world of itself just by, seeing how it's expanded into Life is Strange 2 now, and it feels like it can really build on some sort of world. So I really liked the Neo Paris. I thought the pictures and all that stuff were really nice, but I think when you come to the gameplay, that's where it kind of falls short a little from where we'd want it to be, kind of thing. Like, I don't mind I don't really mind that illusion of the open world, and that, like, you have to look for platforms and stuff like that. It can get frustrating but then you kind of have this indication where you go towards a platform, and then you have like the meters that shorten, and you kind of get there and you climb up, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going in the right direction. At least you don't have the frustration of getting lost, right? But, when a world lacks immersiveness, it's because you can't interact with anything in it, except for like the random people that are around the area.
Yeah, I mean, this is, again, Dontnod Entertainment, they were really trying to do something special. You can tell when you suddenly look at the game, and where they obviously try to shake things up is where they give you a fighting system which uses something called the Combo Lab, and here by performing different combos you can heal yourself, you can gain extra attacks, and you program in the combos yourself. And we were discussing this before, and it was something like, they estimate there's something like 10,000 different combos you could put into this game, which...
Well, Wikipedia says there's 50,000 possible by, I guess, the end of the game, I suppose. You could have that much if you've actually experimented all of it, right?
Yeah.
But it's a tricky thing, I think. It takes a lot of time to adapt to, and to be smart in where you place these presents that you pick up. And presents is kind of like what you'd get in, I don't know, a skill tree. I don't know what you call that, I guess. Something like that. You collect them as you go through the levels, and you find different things, and you beat up more people, sort of thing.
I think the combat itself, it has no real sort of connection to it. When you're fighting any of the generic bad guys that you encounter along the way, there never feels to be any sort of presence to the actual fighting. It's just feels very much like a step back, in that you're playing something like on an older system.
Yeah.
But it never feels like you've got any connection, and the characters are so animated, so spindly as well. There never feels to be any sort of force to it. So the combat element to the game becomes old really, really quickly.
The combat system, I think the main issue is that when we get into like hectic scenes where we have like these ghouls in a certain way, which have these abilities that they can like vanish into thin air, and then they have this sort of ability, it gets really hard because it's a game of memory then, because you have to remember where you put your presence. You have to remember what combos triggers your healing and what combos triggers your whatever special ability that you put into it. And it's just a smush of things that come together. And at a certain time, it's hard to be like, oh, well, some guy's beating my ass behind me and I'm trying to evade him away. And then I have to think about the buttons I'm pressing them at the right time to get that chain and get the cooldown and get the bonus so that you can trigger that ultimate move, you know, to be like all powerful, you know, for like.
I think I was that caught up in like the lackluster combat system, so that adding in this combo system on as well, because when you have fight scenes such as the ones we have here, where it's just basically you're button mashing for the best part, so all it does really is stops you from button mashing, really, because if you like, all you're basically doing is creating these random outcomes for your character that you really don't want, but at the same time it's not really affecting you. You're just like healing after taking like one punch because you've pressed the triangle button 3 times or whatever it is. I think it is one of the most lackluster things, and it's a shame really because the story itself is really interesting. This idea of memory now being utilized not only for profit but also how it could be manipulated as well, using this technology, and it's that memory manipulation which actually creates some of the strongest moments of the game, as you're given the opportunity to remix memories of different individuals, so that they believe certain outcomes have happened and that you can sort of win them over to your goals. And it's a shame really because, as I said, these are the stronger moments of the game and you only get to play through these sequences a few times. And it kind of just made you wish that perhaps they made a game out of that, or they just included more of those sort of sections. It sort of really stands out, and in turn sort of proves a little detrimental to the main game itself.
I think the memory remixing is definitely, like you said, one of the stronger points. It was really entertaining because there's all these different outcomes you can go. You can scroll back and forth. It's like playing on videotape and you're editing someone's memory, right?
Yeah.
And it's really cool in that sense. And I do commend the fact that Dontnod really did put a lot of heart into this. And you can tell, like, a lot of the choices they made, maybe they didn't all deliver. But, you know, I think the combat system, if they had simplified it a little bit more and didn't make it so, like, multi-layered, it would have been a little bit better. Because, like, obviously right now, it's for the... I would say it's, like, the system is for those really hardcore gamers. Because it's a little complicated, and there's a lot of things to remember and a lot of technique that goes into the whole thing. But at the same time, you know, they do get really clever in the sense that they really use that memory and the technology that the world has right now and in a futuristic setting, and puts it in with, like, say you get other weapons and not only the melee combats, and you kind of have, like, you know, the spammer or something that you get from this bad guy that you beat up. And I mean, it gives you frequent, like, there are a lot of, you know, ghouls and thugs that you kind of just fight on and off, and you have these, like, kind of mini boss battles, but then, you know, you have, like, some bigger boss battles, and they kind of fall into that storyline where you have some really pretty cutscenes, and it's kind of like you're watching a movie, and it works in that sense because the story is so interesting and the setting is so compelling to be a part of. And, you know, there's these little things that, you know, you have to find a picture that it's on a screen, and then it boosts your health or boosts whatever focus or whatever it is that they call it. And these things all work really well together. It's just that, you know, it's sad to see that there are things like, you know, those, like, little things that I find we said the same thing about We Happy Few, where it kind of overcomplicates a game too much. and it loses the essence of, you know, what it is, you know, what it's trying to do, and kind of overpowers on like the story and the setting and these little things that work well. And but then, I mean, if you think about it, if we did more memory remixing, would we have thought the game so much better, right? It's kind of like a double-edged sword. Would it become too repetitive in the sense that, like, they do have other little memory puzzles which work because, you know, you follow this guy called Bad Request, and he gives you kind of like this path. For example, that's one of the first things that you learn how to do in the game is you follow Bad Request, and it gives you like this image, and you do that a few times afterwards. You follow a character, and you kind of dial into their memories, and you follow their track that they leave behind, like their memory fragment kind of that they leave behind, to show you the path of how to get to where you need to go. And you need to obviously figure out that puzzle in order to move forward. And these are really clever ideas, you know. They're different plays on how to use memory in a game to really work. So there's a lot of things that do work here, but the things that don't work are just so cumbersome, I guess.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's frustrating because there's a good game in here. It's just at the same time it's one that's been let down by its flaws, and there's never been a follow-up to sort of correct these things. Because like if we look at the original Uncharted again, which I think is the closest comparison we can get here, because you can see there's so many similarities between this and the original Uncharted Drake's Fortune, and when we get onto the second game, Amongst Thieves, and they obviously have the opportunity to correct all these faults and add all this sort of depth and stuff, and I think that's what would remember me if it ever got a sequel. It would have been a case of we would have seen the same thing here, as they would have corrected these minor sort of issues here, which really detracts, because when the game's working, like if you're doing like the escape sequence at the start where you're running away from the big robot, or when you're just sort of interacting with characters, it's really sort of interesting. It's just every time I got into a fight scene, it's like, oh god, not again. And it was like, can we just enough of the fighting? Can I just run away from people? But sadly, that's not an option either. So.
Yeah, like, I don't know. It's crazy because they're talking about the sequel, and I mean, as you look through the stuff a little bit more, they had slated an idea for a sequel, but Capcom didn't want to go through with it because of Life is Strange's success. So essentially, Life is Strange's success kind of took over their studio instead of this. But I think it's nice that, you know, evaluating Dontnod right now and seeing like their debut game and looking at Remember Me, despite all that stuff, you really can kind of see where some of the winning points of the game got transferred over into, say, Life is Strange, or their creativity and the story and all that stuff is still very, very, you know, present.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not even like a particularly long game either. So this is one that you. So I don't even know whether to recommend it as a curiosity, because, as I said, I mean, it's so diversive in the fact that there's moments where I just really loved it, and there's moments where I hated it equally as well. And I mean, this is a game which you can burn for in about 7 hours. It's because it's so on rails as well. It's not like there's a huge amount of exploration that's going to take up your time either. So it's if you see this one cheap, then I would say to pick it up and give it a curiosity look. But at the same time, don't go in with any particular high expectations, because you think, oh, it's a Dontnod title that is going to be comparable to the later work, as this is really sort of a company finding their feet, and you can tell that already they've got the creativity there. It's just the execution that wasn't quite on the same level. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, well, everybody starts somewhere, and it's definitely a decent enough start. You know, It had its promise, despite the fact that, you know, it had its little issues. So, what score would you give Remember Me?
Remember Me, it's a 2.5 out of 5. As I said, it's when it works well, and when it doesn't work, it's the most frustrating experience. At the same time, it's a game which looks absolutely stunning, but it's all a false illusion. It's a cardboard city we're looking at here, in which that you're given this almost limitless world that you think you can go out and interact with and enjoy, and no, it's you're gonna go the route they want you to go, and the lack of interaction in the world just sort of another thing that sort of just killed it for me, because there was so much of this world I wanted to just like look around and explore, and sadly it just never gives you that option.
I see where you're coming from. I'm a bit of a different gamer as you are, so I kind of did enjoy it a little bit more. I'm definitely a 3 out of 5 for this one, a little bit higher. I think 2.5 is a little harsh, but so that's where I'm at. I mean, I thought that I liked the game being on rails. I like those moments. Like, I would have loved to interact a little bit more, but still, it's all right. This wraps up our review of Remember Me. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. Head over to our home base, thatmomentin.com, to read our gaming reviews. To see news and gaming trailers and all that stuff, you can head over to our Facebook, or you can head over to our Facebook and our Twitter at Game Warp Podcast. You can see our gaming obsessions at Instagram.com/Game Warp Podcast. And eventually, when we start getting back on the streaming, you can head over to Twitch.tv/Game Warp Podcast. Till next time, bye!